My 8-year-old son stood on a soccer field 30 yards away and looked at me like I was someone to be afraid of. Someone had told him something, and that was the moment I stopped trying to keep the peace. Let me back up. My name is Daniel. I'm 36. I work as a project manager for a construction company. Been doing it 11 years, make around $94,000 a year base plus bonuses. I have 2 kids, Marcus, who is 8, and Lily, who is 6. They are the entire reason I get out of bed. That is not an exaggeration. I was married to my ex-wife, Renee, for 9 years. The last 4 years were rough, a lot of fighting, a lot of resentment, and eventually we both agreed it was over. The divorce was finalized 2 years ago. I thought we could handle it like adults. I genuinely believed that. I was wrong. The custody agreement, approved by a judge, was a week-on, week-off arrangement. Kids with me Sunday through Sunday 1 week, then with Renee the next. We split holidays equally. We were required to use a co-parenting app called TalkingParents for all communication, so everything was logged. Neither of us was supposed to discuss the divorce, child support, or any adult conflict in front of the kids. That was explicitly written in the order. We also had to share all medical and school information within 24 hours. Child support was set at $1,100 a month from me to Renee based on the income difference at the time. She was working as a dental office manager making about $58,000 a year. The support was auto-drafted from my account on the 1st of every month. I never missed it, not once. Now here's something about Renee's parents, Gerald and Patricia. They're wealthy. Gerald made his money in commercial real estate in the 90s and they've been coasting on it ever since. They live in a 5-bedroom house in a gated community about 20 minutes from us. They adore Renee. They believe she is incapable of doing anything wrong. And the moment our divorce was finalized, they started funding her life in ways that weren't visible on paper. I didn't know that part yet. The first few months post-divorce were tense but manageable. Renee returned the kids on time most weeks. She kept me informed about school stuff. There were small digs, a comment Marcus made once about how mom says you get to have fun money, but I let it go. I was documenting everything on Talking Parents from day one, just logging conversations and noting anything that felt off. My attorney had told me to do that from the start. I'm glad I listened. The small violations started around month 4. In January, Renee returned the kids 45 minutes late. I messaged her on Talking Parents. She said traffic. I logged it. In February, Marcus came home without his winter coat, the good one I'd bought him for $80. Renee said she didn't know where it was, that he must have left it somewhere. 3 weeks later, I saw it in a photo she posted on social media. The coat was right there at her parents' house. I logged that too with a screenshot. In March, Lily came home saying she didn't want to call me Daddy anymore. She wanted to call me Daniel because that's what Mom called me. Lily was 5 years old. I sat with her and gently asked where she got that idea. She said Mom said it's more grown-up. I sent Renee a message on Talking Parents, kept it factual, no accusations. She sent back one line. I didn't tell her anything, kids say things. I logged it. By April, the pattern was clear enough that I called my attorney, a guy named Preston who specializes in family law. I laid out everything I had. He told me it wasn't enough for emotion yet, but to keep logging because this kind of behavior typically escalates. He used the phrase, they test and then they push. That's exactly what happened. April 18th, Renee told Marcus's school, without telling me, that only she was authorized to check him out early. I found out when I showed up to take Marcus to a dentist appointment I had already scheduled and logged in the co-parenting app. I had to stand in the school hallway while the office called Renee to verify I was allowed to take my own son to the dentist. Marcus watched the whole thing from behind a glass window. He looked embarrassed. I kept my voice calm. Inside, I was furious. I messaged Renee on Talking Parents that same day. You changed the school's contact protocols without notifying me. Per our agreement, we share equal parental rights. Please correct this with the school today. She responded 4 hours later. I was just trying to keep the kids safe. No apology, no correction. I forwarded everything to Preston. May was quiet, which should have told me something. When Renee went quiet, it meant she was regrouping. June hit hard. On June 6th, Renee filed a modification request with the court. She claimed her financial situation had changed significantly and requested an increase in child support. And she listed her current income as $0. She had quit her job at the dental office. Preston got the filing and called me that same morning. I sat in my truck in a parking lot at 8:45 a.m. reading the documents on my phone. She had voluntarily resigned from a $58,000 a year job in May and was now asking the court to recalculate my support obligation based on her having no income. Preston explained what that meant in practical terms. If the court accepted her claimed income at face value, my monthly payment could jump to somewhere between $2,000 and $2,400 a month. That's a significant hit on a $94,000 salary, especially when I'm already covering half of daycare costs and all of the kids' medical insurance through my employer. I asked Preston what we could do. He told me two things. First, we would fight the modification by demonstrating that she voluntarily impoverished herself, a legal concept that means you can't quit your job to manipulate support calculations. Second, he said we needed to figure out how she was actually living, because nobody just quits a $58,000 job with 2 young kids and no plan. That's when I started paying attention to things I'd overlooked. Renee was still in the house we'd rented during the marriage. Rent was $2,200 a month. She had a car payment on a 2022 SUV. She was posting photos of weekend trips to a resort 2 hours away. Her Instagram showed she'd been getting her nails done every 2 weeks since the divorce. None of this was the lifestyle of someone with zero income. I pulled up Gerald and Patricia's public records online. Their property taxes alone were over $18,000 a year. I also talked to a mutual friend named Carla. She'd stayed friendly with me after the divorce and was close enough to the situation to know things. Carla told me carefully that Gerald had been giving Renee what she called a monthly gift to help her get back on her feet. Carla didn't know the amount. Preston said we needed to subpoena Renee's bank records. That process takes time and costs money, but it was the only way to show the court what was actually coming in. I authorized it immediately. While that was in motion, July arrived. And July was when things went from frustrating to genuinely damaging for the kids. I had Marcus and Lily the first week of July. Normal Sunday handoff on the 9th, 5 p.m. Marcus gave me a big hug. Lily kissed my cheek. Everything was fine. I expected them back July 16th at 5 p.m. At 4:30 p.m. on the 16th, I got a Talking Parents message from Renee. The kids want to stay an extra few days. Marcus has a playdate and Lily is not feeling well. I'll bring them Thursday. No question, just a statement. I replied immediately that per our custody order the exchange was Sunday at 5 p.m. and I'd be there to pick them up. She didn't respond. I drove to her apartment at 5. She came to the door and told me Lily had a fever and it wasn't safe to move her. I asked to see Lily. Renee said no. I stood on that doorstep for 20 minutes asking to see my sick daughter and being turned away. I called Preston from the parking lot. He told me to document everything, the time, what was said, all of it, and not to force entry under any circumstances. He said if the kids weren't returned by midnight to call the non-emergency police line for a welfare check. At 11:40 p.m. I made the call. 2 officers went to Renee's apartment. They confirmed both kids were there and fine. Lily had a slight runny nose, nothing more. Renee told the officers she had already agreed to drop them off Thursday. The officers couldn't force an immediate return, they're not family court judges, and suggested I contact my attorney. I got my kids back Thursday. Marcus was quiet. Lily climbed into my lap the moment she walked through the door and didn't let go for about an hour. When I asked Marcus how the week was, he shrugged and said fine, then added, Mom was upset a lot. That was July. In August, Marcus's soccer coach, a guy named Coach Ramon, called me about uniform fees. During that call, in passing, he mentioned that Renee had come to him a few weeks earlier and told him I had a history of aggressive behavior at children's events, and she wanted him to know in case I showed up agitated. He said he'd taken note of it but wasn't sure what to make of it. I thanked him and asked if he'd be willing to write down the date and content of that original conversation. He agreed. I added it to the file. September brought the school year and a new layer of chaos. Renee enrolled Lily in a different school, not the one we had agreed on, not the one designated in our custody order, but a different school about 4 miles away. She did it without telling me, without my consent, and without notifying me within 24 hours as required. I found out because Lily mentioned my new school has a pink playground on a Saturday morning. I messaged Renee on Talking Parents within the hour. She responded the next day saying the new school was better for Lily's social development and that I could visit any time. That's not how this works. Both parents have to agree on school enrollment. It's in the order, black and white. Preston filed an emergency motion on the school enrollment issue. At the October hearing, Judge Carmona ordered Lily returned to the agreed-upon school immediately and noted the violation in the record. It wasn't a massive ruling, but it was on paper. Renee was told by a judge in a courtroom that she had violated the custody order. She did not look embarrassed, she looked annoyed. Her mother, Patricia, was in the gallery, arms crossed the entire time, glaring at me. Gerald sat next to her, staring at the table. October also brought what I can only describe as the outside interference campaign. My own brother, Kevin, 3 years older than me, has 2 kids, has always been close to Renee, called me one afternoon. He said he'd heard some things and was worried about me. I asked what he'd heard. He said Renee told him I was using the kids to build a legal case against her, that I was recording them, coaching their answers, trying to get full custody just to stop paying support. Then he said, "I know you wouldn't do that, Daniel, but maybe you should just let some of this go. The kids need peace." I told Kevin I was happy to share the Talking Parents logs with him if he wanted to understand what was actually happening. He said he didn't need to see documents, he just wanted me to be the bigger person. I told him I was trying to follow a court order and my ex-wife was violating it. Those are not the same thing. He sighed and said, "Just think about how this looks, man." I ended the call politely. My cousin Janet reached out the following week with a long text, paragraphs, about how co-parenting is about compromise, how going to court constantly was hurting the kids, and how she'd preyed on it and felt she needed to reach out. I didn't respond. I saved a screenshot. My one real ally through all of this was my friend Greg. Greg went through a brutal custody situation himself about 5 years back and came out with shared custody that actually works. He didn't tell me what to do. He just said, "They're betting you'll get tired before the court does." He was right. That was exactly what Renee and her parents were counting on. November 14th, the soccer game. I showed up at Marcus's 6 p.m. Tuesday evening game, parked, walked toward the field, and Coach Ramon intercepted me before I reached the sideline. He looked uncomfortable. He told me Renee had come to him the previous week and said I had made threats at a prior sporting event and asked that I be kept away from the team during games. No documentation, no filing with the league, just a story she told him. Coach Ramon, to his credit, told me directly. He said he hadn't believed it, but he didn't know what to do. I looked across the field. Marcus was standing with a few teammates. He saw me. He didn't wave. He just watched me, waiting to see what would happen, like he'd been told something scary. I pulled out my phone right there and texted Preston. She told the soccer coach I'm a threat. Marcus saw the whole thing, documenting as it happens. I stayed for the entire game. I stood quietly at the far end of the sideline and cheered for Marcus every time he touched the ball. When the game ended, Renee collected both kids fast and walked them to her car. Marcus looked back at me once. I waved. He lifted his hands slightly. I sat in my car in the parking lot for a few minutes after they left. Then I drove home and wrote out a full account, time-stamped, and emailed it to Preston. The next morning I was in Preston's office at 9 a.m. He laid out everything we had. The school enrollment violation already on record with Judge Carmona. The July visitation denial backed by a police report number. Coach Ramon's written statement. The full Talking Parents log going back 20 months. Late returns, the coat, the name coaching, the school contact protocol change. And the bank records from the subpoena. The bank records were the smoking gun on the money side. In the 12 months since Renee had quit her job, Gerald had deposited a total of $37,400 into her account. Not one lump sum, regular transfers, $3,000 on the first of every month, with occasional additional amounts with memo lines that said household expenses. She had effectively replaced her $58,000 salary with $37,400 in cash from her parents, none of which appeared on any income declaration she'd filed with the court. Preston said it was the clearest example of voluntary impoverishment, backed by undisclosed third-party support he'd seen in years. We filed 2 motions simultaneously. First, a motion to dismiss her support modification and impute income to her at her prior earning capacity of $58,000 annually, accounting for the undisclosed parental support. Second, a contempt motion on 3 specific counts: the July visitation denial, the unauthorized school enrollment, and the defamatory statements to Coach Ramon that interfered with my parental rights and caused demonstrable harm to Marcus. We also requested a guardian ad litem, an independent attorney appointed to represent only the children's interests, and a parenting coordinator to oversee future disputes. Renee's attorney fired back within a week. They claimed I was weaponizing the court system, that I was financially motivated, that Renee had only ever acted in the best interests of the children. They filed a cross motion alleging I had been emotionally unavailable and created an unstable environment, but offered zero documentation. No dates, no incidents, just allegations. Preston said, "They're hoping volume equals weight. Without documentation, it wouldn't hold up." The guardian ad litem, a woman named Dr. Fiona Walsh, was appointed in early December. She met with both of us separately, visited both homes, interviewed Marcus and Lily in a child-appropriate setting, and spoke with Coach Ramon, Marcus's classroom teacher and Lily's pediatrician. The process took about 6 weeks. Dr. Walsh's report came back in mid-January, 42 pages. I read it at my kitchen table at 7 a.m. before the kids woke up. Here are the parts that mattered. She noted that Marcus showed signs of loyalty conflict consistent with exposure to parental alienation tactics, professional language, for when a kid has been put in the middle and pressured to take a side. She noted that Lily told her in their session, "Daddy is sad because Mom doesn't like him." A 6-year-old shouldn't know that. She noted that my home environment was structured, warm, and child-centered, and that the kids visibly relaxed during their time at the father's residence. She noted that Renee had demonstrated a pattern of unilateral decision-making that disregarded the co-parents' legal rights, and that this pattern poses a risk to the children's long-term well-being. She recommended primary physical custody be modified to a 60-40 split in my favor, with Renee having the kids every other weekend plus 1 weekday evening per week. She also recommended mandatory co-parenting counseling and a parenting coordinator with binding decision-making authority. The court hearing was in late February. Judge Carmona had Dr. Walsh's report. She had the documented evidence. She had Coach Ramon's written statement. She had the full Talking Parents logs. She had the bank records showing $37,400 in parental support. Renee sat at the table in a pale blue blazer. Her parents were in the gallery again, Patricia with her arms crossed the whole time, Gerald staring at the table. The hearing took most of the day. Both attorneys presented. Dr. Walsh gave a summary of her findings. I testified for about 40 minutes. Renee testified for about an hour. At one point, Renee's attorney asked her why she'd left her job. She said she had been overwhelmed and needed to focus on the children. Judge Carmona asked her directly whether she was receiving financial assistance from her parents. Renee paused and said, "They help sometimes." The judge asked for a specific number. Renee looked at her attorney. Her attorney said the question called for privileged financial information. Preston objected. The judge overruled and repeated the question. Renee said, "Maybe a few thousand here and there." Preston had the bank records up on the screen 10 seconds later. $37,400 over 12 months. The room went quiet. Judge Carmona's ruling came down in March, about 3 weeks after the hearing. Preston called me on a Friday afternoon while I was at my desk at work. Here's what the judge ordered. Custody was modified to 60-40 in my favor. Renee gets the kids every other weekend, Friday at 5 p.m. to Sunday at 5 p.m., plus Wednesday evenings from 5 to 8. No overnight on Wednesdays. On child support, Judge Carmona imputed income to Renee at her prior earning capacity of $58,000 per year, noting that her voluntary resignation was not caused by any disability or legitimate changed circumstance. She also directed that the $3,000 monthly parental support be factored into Renee's financial picture. The result was that my support obligation did not increase. It was reduced to $620 per month given the new custody split and the imputed income. On contempt, the judge found Renee in contempt on 2 of the 3 counts. The July visitation denial, sustained. The unauthorized school enrollment, sustained. The Coach Ramon situation was not technically contempt under the specific order language, but the judge noted it on the record as a deliberate interference with the co-parent's relationship with the minor child, and stated any future similar conduct would be considered contempt. The consequences were real. Renee was ordered to pay $4,800 in my attorney's fees, Preston's costs for the contempt motions specifically. She was ordered to complete a 12-week co-parenting course and participate in monthly parenting coordinator check-ins for the next 18 months. The parenting coordinator has binding authority. If there's a dispute about a school, a medical decision, a vacation, the coordinator decides and the decision stands unless someone appeals to the judge, which costs time and money. She did not get away with it. I want to be clear about that. The system was slow. It was expensive on my end, too. I spent close to $19,000 in legal fees over the full process. But it worked. After the ruling, I gave myself a weekend to breathe. Marcus was at my place. On Saturday morning, I made blueberry pancakes, his favorite, and he sat at the counter and talked to me about a book he was reading and what position he wanted to play in soccer next season. He was just a kid talking to his dad. No tension. No watching to see what would happen. Lily had her first ever sleepover at a friend's house that same Saturday. She called me at 8:30 p.m. to say goodnight. She didn't sound nervous. She sounded happy. That's what I was fighting for. 2 kids who get to just be kids. It's now about 6 months out from the ruling. Renee has largely complied with the new order. The exchanges are still cold. We don't make small talk, but she returns the kids on time. She completed the co-parenting course. She got a new job in March at a medical billing company. Gerald's monthly deposits have stopped based on the financial disclosures the court still requires her to file quarterly. Marcus is doing better. His teacher pulled me aside at a conference 2 months ago and said he seemed more settled this year compared to last. He started asking me to come to his games instead of just showing up and hoping. One Thursday evening, he texted me from Renee's phone. He doesn't have his own yet, to say his team won their scrimmage and he scored twice. That text meant more to me than the court ruling did. Lily still calls me Daddy. She always did. I want to say one thing to anyone who's in the middle of what I went through a year ago. The documentation is everything. I know it feels tedious. I know logging every late return and every snarky message feels obsessive. But that log was the entire foundation of my case. Judge Carmona said in her ruling that the Talking Parents record was clear and compelling evidence of a pattern, not my word against Renee's, a time-stamped record. Kevin called me after the ruling. He said he hadn't realized how documented everything was and he apologized for telling me to let it go. I appreciated that. We're okay now. Janet never reached out again? That's fine. Greg took me out for a beer the week after the ruling came through. We sat at the bar and he said, "I told you, you outlasted them." He was right. They bet on me getting tired. I didn't. My kids are safer now. The schedule is stable. The parenting coordinator handles the small arguments before they become court motions. The financial situation is fair. And Marcus scored twice in a scrimmage and wanted his dad to know about it. I'll take it. So here's what I want to know from you. If you were in this situation, would you have kept pushing through the courts the way I did, or would you have tried to settle earlier and avoided all of this? Drop it in the comments. I genuinely want to hear it.